So, hey everybody, today we are welcoming Akash to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah, listen, I'm so excited for our audience to get to know you more and for our conversation to unfold even further as well. So before we dive into what you're all about and what it is you're doing in the world, because we're really excited by that alone, just that mission, just share with our audience a little bit about briefly who you are, what you do, where you're from, and give yourself a bit of an intro there.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Akash Vaghela. I live in London. I am turning 30 this year. I'm a coach, author, and I run a world-leading transformation company called RNT Fitness with a big vision to see a world transformed one life-changing journey at a time.
Excellent. Akash, one thing our listeners love hearing about is kind of that personal side to our guests who come in, is like their story, their background a bit, how they got to where they are. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit more about your background, about your story, anything that may come up during your time that you think our listeners might be interested in hearing as well.
Yeah, sure. So when I was growing up, I always wanted to follow my father's footsteps in becoming a lawyer. He'd worked at a law firm all his life. All my work experience, my subjects chosen at school was all geared towards a life in law. And then when I was around 17 years old, one of my best friends said to me, "Oh, why don't you come to the gym with me?" And I said, "Nah, what's the point in doing that? It's a waste of time, etc." And he kept prodding and prodding and prodding. And then he said to me, "Look, it's going to help you. It's going to really help you get girls." I thought, oh, now he's got my attention. It could be something here. So I went along with him. And at the time, I was 58 kilos, skinny fat, moobs in a pot belly. So I lacked the confidence and didn't really feel comfortable in my own skin. But when I went into the gym, something in those first few months just completely transformed my life in that, yes, I was getting into better shape, but I started to develop a level of focus, control, and confidence that I never had before. And it then took me into a space of being completely obsessed with health and fitness. I was spending all my free time reading about nutrition, reading about health, reading about how to improve our health and nutrition. And any moment I had, I'd spend on it. At the same time, I was still, doing work experience for different law firms, meant to be applying to my personal statements for universities, etc. And then one day I was in a careers class and I was meant to be writing the final draft of my personal statement for law. And instead, I was reading a nutrition article, and my best friend who was sitting next to me said to me, "Oh, why don't you just do something in this space?" And I thought, well, there's nothing really in it. So that evening, I went home and discovered something called sport and exercise science. And then that night, I made the decision I'm gonna shift gears. And then the next day, I went to tell my parents. And I come from a South Asian background where you only really do three things to be considered successful: it's medicine, law, or finance. If you're not doing one of those three things, you're considered a failure. And there's no one else. So if you're not doing those three things, you're not really doing it right. And this was, say, 12 years ago. So the fitness industry was still very new, and people of my culture weren't really in it. So when I told them that, the first thing they said to me was, "Well, how are you going to pay the bills?" And I thought to myself, "Wow." I would just reply back saying, "I'll find a way." And just a year before this happened, my first cousin passed away at the age of 19. And it really taught me at a very young age just how quick life can be and how short life can be. And when I look back and think, why did I make that decision so quickly? Because people now will always struggle to leave jobs they're in or struggle to choose what they really want to do. I think, why did I make that choice when everyone around me, I went to a very high-performing academic school. Everyone was doing sort of the usual subjects. And the only thing I could think of is subconsciously that had a massive impact on me. And it taught me at a young age that we've just got to do what we want to do and what really aligns with our passion and our purpose. So I made the decision to change away from law and went off to university, started helping people for free, started experimenting, learning all about the field. Then I started working as a personal trainer in the city. And then I started realizing my colleagues around me were having kids. And if you know anything about personal training, it's the most unsociable hours and you're outside the house, right? You leave at 5 a.m, get back at 10 at night. And you're driven by the client's diary. You don't really have much control or flexibility. And they started to have kids and they're all turning up bleary-eyed. They never saw their children except for on Sundays. And I thought to myself, like, fast forward a few years when I want to have my own family, I don't want to live that lifestyle. So I started thinking of different ways to stay in the industry, but do it differently. And that's where RNT Fitness was formed in May 2017. And 5 years later, here we are. So that's the long and short of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, because it's amazing how when we're reminded of our own mortality, it can really drive us into making clear decisions that end up directing your entire life, because that's something that I know for sure a lot of our listeners experience, maybe living in certain cultures or with certain expectations about what they should or shouldn't be doing with their lives, and making that kind of decision is actually really quite challenging for people. So we're going to kind of dig in a bit deeper shortly about your methodology and what it is you deliver now with RNT. But before you do, tell us a little bit about what is RNT? What does it stand for? Yeah. Because if anyone was to kind of look you up right now off the bat, they're going to see lots of incredible physical transformations, but I know what you stand for is so much more than that. So give some insights there.
Yeah, sure. So around the time, so 12 years ago, when I first experienced this, looking back, what I discovered was that the physical is the vehicle for the great good in your life. When you change your physical body, it acts as a vehicle to everything else that you do. Now, there's many layers to that phrase, physical is the vehicle. On the sort of surface level, it's like when you're in shape, you can perform better, you feel better, etc. The deeper sense to it is, we only have one body. This is what's carrying us through this part of our life and this soul's journey. It's the vehicle to kind of taking us through it. But so when I started RNT and I started working with people on a deeper basis, I realized that what we were doing, yes, we were changing people's bodies and getting them into jaw-dropping shape. But what we were doing, especially in the process of keeping them in shape, was rewiring their behavior, mindset, and identity to become effectively new people. And they were really transforming from not just a physical basis, but a mental, emotional, and a spiritual basis. And this is where we see people quit relationships that were not serving them before, or dive deeper into relationships that they weren't able to do before, or do things that they suddenly never thought that was possible, because they have a new level of focus, control, and confidence. So when we first set up RNT stood for Results Now Training, and mainly because we just couldn't think of a name, and we were just like, we want to help people get results now. But as we started working with people, we realized that the name it doesn't really align with what we're about. So what you've read now is, I think we've only connected since it's changed. It's now redefining the narrative of transformation. Yeah. Now the reason it's there is we were just like, we love the words RNT, we love the acronym RNT. We need to keep it, but we need to change the meaning of it. And we're going back and forth in the team WhatsApp for months, and then one of them just said, redefining the narrative of transformation. I was like, bingo, that's it. We don't need to change our name anymore. That's what it is, because that's exactly what we're about. It's redefining what physical transformation is about, and it has the potential to do so much more in your life. So that name wasn't strategically thought of before. It was a cover up.
That's a good cover up, because I had no idea. Because the learning since obviously about your mission and your philosophy of what it is you're all about, it seems like that was definitely there in the first place, even if that wasn't what the letter stood for.
This is the thing. It's like, I don't think I fully grasped the depths of what I was doing until I started RNT. Before that, when I was a personal trainer, it was very much just let's just help people lose weight.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I never saw the depth to what I was doing, which is weird, because you actually see people in person. When I started working online and the way we did it, all I was hearing was the other stuff, like, oh, I'm doing this now, I'm doing that now, I feel like this, I feel like that. And I thought to myself, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I had this weird realization. I remember you guys are in Thailand. I was in Riley Beach in Krabi.
Yeah.
And I was walking I was on a solo trip, and I was walking. And then I just had this light bulb moment. I was like, the physical is the vehicle. And I was like, oh, that's it. This is what I'm doing. And that's where I sort of crystallized it. And I really started connecting deeper to what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and the bigger mission and vision that we're on.
It's so refreshing to hear somebody else that's come from that fitness space into more of a transformative space, because it isn't just about that physical, really. Yes, it's the vehicle, and yes, it's important. But we obviously combine, we've both been in this space for like 35 years, and we spent like 20 years of that in the fitness space, literally doing the personal training, managing facilities, like big corporate fitness chains, seeing it from the inside out, and how they operate and how they function and the way they market people and all this kind of stuff. And we just, same as you really, we got to that point where it just didn't, it wasn't quite hitting the mark as to what it is really all about. And that was where kind of our journey with wellness theory then was created as well, really homing in on the mental, emotional and physical well-being, wasn't it?
Well, definitely. It's like, I just want to pull out a couple of things like you said about like the body being, our physical body being that vehicle for experiencing everything, our soul, our life, and living in this physical world. And the better you feel and the more you look after your body, the better, the more ease and the more flow of life that you're going to have. And that's the bit I was missing when I first became a personal trainer like 21 years ago. Like what I was doing with myself and what I was doing with clients was all physical. It was lose fat, get strong, build muscle, and not even think about what the very important aspect of what you talked about, which is the mindset, the identity, the behavior, the habits. All these things weren't in the forefront of my mind at that point. It was train hard, eat very, very clean, don't socialize, don't go out eating, make sure you stay at home eating bland chicken and rice and broccoli and all that rubbish. And I'd done that for myself, and I got into great shape, but I felt rubbish. I had no energy. I was in pain all the time. And I had some clients where same thing, they were going yo-yo results. Some were getting really good results and some were getting no results. And I was always basing on, okay, either I'm not training hard enough, I'm not eating well enough, my clients aren't training hard enough. What's the missing link here? And it took me that a long while. I think 10 years, the first 10 years of my career was a hard slog. It was very, very train more, train harder, eat cleaner, sacrifice all the things I enjoy, because I know I can't get the body I want or feel the way I want if I have those things. And it took me a while to realize that the missing link is basically the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the soul side of it. It all connects with the physical. If you want to live in actually the life that you want in your physical, in your vessel, in your physical body, feeling good, behaving amazing, looking great as well, how you want to look, you've got to connect the dots. You've got to align your mental, emotional, and physical beings in one. And that's when things start to change for me and start to change for my clients as well. And to stop becoming about just train and eat, and start to become about how you identify with what you're doing, how you identify with yourself. Because I'm sure you know, as a personal trainer, I've done it before as well. You get to a certain stage, you're training hard, you get good results, and you're still not satisfied, you're still not happy. And a lot of people experience this because they're always comparing themselves to other people. So I love what you said about that. You're focusing on the mental side, on the mentality, on the identity of it, because that combined with the physicality is so important to that transformation. It's that missing link I think a lot of people are missing in the physical world of training and transformation.
Well, one of the formulas I have for transformation is introspection plus action equals transformation. Mm-hmm. And if we think about when it's only training hard or eating well, or you're just being a gym bro, basically, all you're doing is the action part, which is why you can get people who might be getting in shape, but they haven't really changed themselves. And there's still that, it's just the new armor they've got on themselves because they haven't done the deep work on the introspection. You need to combine the two in order to achieve the transformation inside and out.
Yeah, and to make it lasting as well, right? Yeah. Because it's so common, and I'm sure anybody listening to this, even personal experiences with fitness, is you set a goal. Usually it's an external goal, a holiday, a wedding, this kind of thing, and you do that. You might get into the shape you want, but then fast forward a year later and you're back to square one. That's happening because of that singular focus. Often, not always, of course, there's exceptions to the rule. But one of the things that I really, really want to dive in with you is because what we've really notice we're aligned with yourself is that when people are healthy and well, they can be a force for good in the world, right? They can really make a difference because they're showing up for themselves in the best way they can, which just creates so much more energy and capacity to be able to do even more. So I'd love for you to share like really your core mission. I know you touched upon it in your intro beautifully, and your philosophy of really what you stand for and that mission that you really, really want to be achieving.
Yeah, so the company vision I've always said is like to see a world transform one life-changing journey at a time. My personal mission is aligned with that, and it's to use the physical as a vehicle to transform people's lives. And ultimately, my way of creating transformation in the world is through the physical transformation, and you doing it in a way that allows people to do things they never thought was possible. I always think the body is a representation of the mind. If your mind's out of whack, you're probably going to see it in your body through. If you're overweight, there's usually a reason for it, right? And you're using various crutches and you're using various bad habits that are causing you to get there. So you need to work on, when you work on the physical transformation done correctly, you can start to strip away those habits and start to rewire your behavior, mindset, identity to then be someone who can do amazing things in the world. So that's my personal vision. But the reason why I say to see a world transformed is because when one person changes, their personal vision is going to be different. But hopefully it's a force for good that then allows something a little bit better to occur. And then it's just that domino effect that really needs to happen, because making bold statements like, yeah, let's change the world is great, but it happens one person at a time, doesn't it? It's one person, then it's a community, then it's a society. And these things take time. That this isn't we're not trying to do this in 2 years. This is like 100-year, 200-year generational thing, which is, it comes to another point is that we're trying to create generational health in people that we impact, because really it's the next generation that are going to be able to pass this on and make a bigger impact for the bigger causes that are out there in the world that need to be tackled.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's so interesting, because what you've said there is just so on point that it starts with one person at a time, because it's very easy, like you said, for us to have these big beautiful statements about what it is we want to do, but it's not always about that. It's about being the change, right? Without being too cliche, it's about being that change, and people model that, right? Without you even setting an intention to do good in the world. The fact that you are being at a different level, you're setting that as a standard, and the people that you're surrounded by can't help but be affected by that, whether there is a big beautiful mission in place, or if it is just somebody being themselves to be the best parent or the best colleague and this kind of stuff. Like, this is just so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about like those transformations having that domino effect. Can you give us any examples of that, of people who've had those transformations that have led to that domino effect, whether it's affected the friends, family, the community, society, or like the world as a whole? Any examples at all?
I think it happens, a few ways that I see it the most is, obviously the biggest one is family. If one person's embarking on this journey, by default, everyone's naturally going to start eating better in the household. By default, they'll all start being healthier as a result. And, you've improved a family's health. Especially when I hear of people say, oh, my kids are now eating this. They're asking, how can I have fruit instead of the biscuits? When these things happen, that makes a real difference, because we know the formative years are the most important years. So if we can impact the parents' habits, which then bleeds into their children's habits, that's transformational in itself. And the other area that I see a lot is in business owners, high performers, entrepreneurs. When they're feeling, looking, and performing at their best, that's going to have a positive impact on all their colleagues, all their clients, all their subscribers, customers, whatever business they're in. It's going to impact so many people, because they're suddenly at their best and they're going to do better work and more meaningful work and be more creative. So suddenly, if you get, when you get these people in, when you transform these people, the potential is massive, because they may have a reach that far goes beyond what you can do. And I think there's a real potential there with high performers, entrepreneurs, people that are really on big missions themselves to be at their best, because their potential for impact is suddenly so much greater. Yeah. So I think those are the two areas we probably see it the most.
Nice.
Or at least I connect with the most.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely some similarities there to kind of what we've noticed. What I'm curious to dive in a little bit deeper with you on is that you mentioned earlier about it's like doing the deeper work, right? It's not just about the physical thing, it's about doing the deeper work, the introspection, identity and mindset. What could you share with our listeners that you think would be a really good starting point for somebody who might be feeling really, really overwhelmed when it comes to their physical journey? When it comes to just getting started, like, how can they start to identify with themselves and with their health?
I think it's I think about this question a lot, because in an ideal world, everyone's doing some level of fitness. Everyone's embarking on this journey. But I think people who are in that position of overwhelm, they really need a trigger, and they really need a lot of push motivation to get going. They almost need to be running away from the tiger just to get things going. Because trying to tell people who are in that position that this is all the things you could achieve, it just becomes like, well, they're so far away, I can't get to that. They need something where they need a moment to happen to them effectively that causes them to think, I can't stay where I'm at right now. And then once I think you get that moment, which, you know, everyone will get that in multiple different ways. And it's typically a superficial way. It'll be something like, I don't like how I looked in that picture, or I can't suddenly fit into my clothes. Something like that will then trigger the reason inside of like, oh, actually, I really need to change. I think the best way, and again, something it would be interesting to hear your thoughts. I think the best way to start this journey is to go all in. I've tried the method of, you know, just you know, walk an extra 1,000 steps a day, do a little bit more, just do a little bit tomorrow. I just don't think you see enough results to develop the momentum you need to see this thing through. I think the difficult period is getting going, and then it's obviously sustaining it. If people don't see results earlier on in themselves, they lose that motivation to keep going, especially when you're in that sort of overwhelmed stage. For people like us, we'd be okay with just doing a little bit better because we have that foundation. And I think for a lot of people, the best tips I can give them, once they do start this, is to limit as much decision fatigue as possible. And by this, I mean, once you know what you need to do, just create a routine out of it, automate the whole thing, and just limit loads of these decisions. Because one of the reasons we feel overwhelmed is because we're making too many decisions each day. Simple things like what you're going to eat for lunch and breakfast and dinner, what you're going to wear to work, all these things can zap so much menial mental energy units that by the end of the day, you feel exhausted and you don't even know why.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to kickstart a journey like this is to create less decision fatigue, know your non-negotiables, and just make things really easy with like precursors in the day. For example, you know, wake up and have your gym kit next to you, put your running shoes at the door, like these sorts of things, which can just get that momentum going. Because what you need at the beginning of a journey when you're overwhelmed is momentum. Once you get that, then things start feeling much more clear as you go along.
Yeah, definitely. My kind of take on that, so you're absolutely right. I think when you've got that foundation, if you've always been pretty active, it is easier to go at it from the physical transformation journey. But what we've noticed is that there's different entry points for different people. So we have people that come to us and it's really about the physical goal. We have people come to us is very much about emotional goals. Maybe they are feeling overwhelmed, or they're snapping at loved ones and things like that. Maybe they're overthinking all the time, negative thinking, got some identity issues, that kind of thing. And so getting that momentum, I've noticed, looks different for everybody. Sometimes it is, yes, getting them out the door in their running shoes. Sometimes it is that whole recognition of, okay, well, this is what I'm being presented with. What is my easiest wins? What is the low-hanging fruit, essentially? And I think that goes in alignment with what you said there about decision making. Because when we start to understand where we're at, we can understand what the next step is. And I think sometimes we can overlook that massively. And like you said, we're looking at this end goal, or looking at all these things that are supposedly possible, and it just feels like, you know, worlds away. So I think that's essential. But for me, I'm an all or nothing kind of person, or I used to be. Now I'm very aware of that and can navigate that nicely, but I was always that way inclined. Luckily, Jonathan's a good influence on me, and he's very good at setting certain routines for the physical side. But then I'm the opposite when it comes to the mental and emotional side. So we've kind of our own little cheerleaders here.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. I'm, like I say,
it's very chilled, right? I can see it's very chilled.
Oh yes, I say I'm very patient with the results. I set the routine because, again, like they say, I don't like making too many decisions in the day because again, it is exhausting. So that's why I like to plan. I like to set routines, and so I know exactly what I'm doing. But like tomorrow, I know exactly what I'm doing tomorrow morning when I first wake up. I've got everything set out, so I don't have to think about it. And there's certain things I'm happy to be patient with and waiting for those results, because I know from my own experience and my own kind of my own learnings over the last 20 odd years is I've learned to kind of inhibit that instant gratification, which I used to be all about. Like, is if I was on, at one point I was on a 6,000 calorie diet a day. I was training 3-4 hours a day because I was trying to put on muscle mass, and because of my body type and that, I burn calories like anything. I struggle to put weight on. So if I was eating that much, a week later, if I didn't put on anything, I'd beat myself up. I would go absolutely nuts. And it took me a while to get into that thing of not expecting instant results and just being patient. And then the more patient, the more relaxed you are, and the more you go into it with a sense of calm, you get the results quicker, because you start stressing about getting the results. You start expecting unrealistic expectations. You create more stress as well, and that inhibits your results you get. So you feel even worse when you don't get the result, and it's just a never-ending vicious cycle. So once I started to learn that, then as long as I've got my routine, I've set it in place, I don't really focus on the results. I just enjoy the process as it goes. And I know through that process, the result will come. Whether it's a week or a month or a year, it will come eventually.
What about you, Akash?
One thing is on what my
your own trait. Yeah, your own.
I have to, with my physical stuff, I'm very much like, I'll just go with the process and the result will come.
Yeah.
When it comes to work stuff, I have to tame that. I have to be conscious of that. I'm very much like, I'll think a lot about the future and forget about, what I need to do now. Does that make sense? Like I'll think, oh, these are the goals I want to hit. I'll just obsess with those goals, but then I'll forget about the process as much. But I need to learn more from my physical realm.
Transferable skills right there.
Yeah. One thing you said around, what is the deeper work? And I don't think I answered that question a bit, is I think where a lot of the transformation happens when, the moment when you get into shape, you have to really push yourself physically, right? And you have to restrain from a lot of things. Like you'd normally have, let's say you're normally having biscuits when you're watching Netflix at night, or you're normally just sitting around watching Netflix for 3 hours a night. Suddenly you're not doing these things, right? Suddenly you might be going for a walk. Suddenly you might be saying no to food. And I think where the introspection element comes in is, instead of just saying, yeah, I'm just dieting hard, it's like, well, why do I have the urge to reach for these foods? Why am I trying to reach for crutches? That's the first element of it. But I think where the real growth comes in is when you try and stay in shape, because now you haven't got a deadline, you haven't got a goal, you're not tied up with a lot of accountability, and suddenly it's like, okay, I'm trying to live a normal lifestyle, and I can't do my old behaviors of, let's say you're someone who used to be 90 kilos, now you go to 60 kilos. Your brain is still thinking like a 90 kilo person. When you go to the pub, you're probably still having 10 pints. So you have to retrain that behavior. And suddenly you have to be aware of the fact, oh, I'm not that person anymore. Why do I want that? So you ask these questions. This is where the introspection comes in. I think this is where people really get a lot of growth, is when they restrain from normal crutches or bad behaviors, is asking like, why am I doing that? And what am I avoiding potentially? Or what am I not confronting? Why am I not just content with myself? And I think that's where a lot of growth can come, and a lot of introspection and learning about yourself. So it's those areas I think a lot of the growth comes.
100%. We when we work with our clients, we do a lot of work around values, right? And eliciting those values, that self-initiated motivation, knowing what you stand for, knowing who you are, because it makes the decision-making process so much easier. And one of the things that I've noticed is that, yes, when we're in your example, 90 kilos, and then we get to 60 kilos, but we're still thinking like the person that we were when we were 90 kilos, I can't help but think that actually we was always this 60 kilo version of ourselves. It just got buried somewhere along the line between conditioning, through your life experiences and all of that kind of stuff. And I just think that's been a really, really powerful part. Do you do any kind of values work, just out of curiosity, with your?
Not. I mean, we discuss it, but it's not intentional.
Yeah. Okay.
We try and stay within our scope, but we'll introduce elements of mindset training.
Yeah.
But with what we try and make aware is these sorts of things, so people start asking these questions themselves. And I completely agree that I think it's more of a revelation of your authenticity rather than a new person. You're always there. It's just everything else has covered it up, right?
Yeah.
It's dusty.
Exactly. It's finding out. You're just doing that deeper work and digging in to find your true self. And that's that quickly there. And what you said was kind of key, is I think half the work is that level of awareness, is because when you are aware, you ask the right questions. And I think that's half the battle, because that's what a lot of people don't. They're just so ready to buy into the next fad or next gimmick to get the results they want quickly. They forget to again, take that introspective look and become aware of why don't I like the way I look? Why aren't I happy with what's going on in my life right now? And ask themselves those questions, become aware of actually what they are doing, and like, and what they can, and the easy changes they can make to make that difference. So I think that level of awareness is just even just becoming aware is just a really, really a strong point there for a lot of people to pick up on.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier, Akash, about those moments, right? And it's in those moments where you realise, do you know what, I've been doing these quick fixes for how many years and they're still not working. I'm still this unhappy. That's, I think, a classic example of one of those moments where you're like, okay, something's got to change because if nothing changes, nothing's going to change, right?
Yeah, and it's just a start, right? The physical work is just a start. We say to people, getting in shape is just getting to the starting line, because that's when the real work begins.
Yeah.
And that's when you can do the other stuff.
Yeah, it's not about getting ready, it's about staying ready.
Exactly.
Right?
Anyone can get in shape, right? It's pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
Eat less and move more. That's it.
Yeah, and people,
staying in shape.
Millions of people do it every year. New Year's resolutions: get in shape, get some results. But then it's the problem is keeping that, and that's again the same as yourself, the same as us. It's all about that lasting change. It's what you do. If it's not sustainable and something you can't create, you can't fit into your life as a long-term solution, it's something you shouldn't be doing, because it's only going to give you a very quick short-term result.
Yeah, definitely. So Akash, I'm really curious to know, in your personal experience, what would you say is the most powerful thing or the most pivotal thing that you've learned about transformation? It could be your own personal transformation, it could be your clients. What's the thing that's most improved your life?
I think the biggest thing of late has been, this has probably been the last 2 years, is it comes back to the awareness factor that you mentioned, Jonathan. Is like you're saying, most people just aren't aware of these sorts of things. My thing has been in the context of like spirituality, which I'm assuming you guys, judging by you got some of the stuff behind you, I'm definitely sure that you guys are into it.
Yeah.
My friend of mine gave me this analogy, and I think it's just the best way to explain it. And he said, everyone's walking around with a plank of, they've got a plank of wood on the floor, right? But they don't realize that if they lift up the plank of wood, there's a pond that goes all the way down, and there's so much to explore within. And if we just open up that if we take off the plank, suddenly we realize there's another world underneath and another world within. And I think the biggest thing for me in the last few years is realizing that, and realizing that it's not just, there's more to the world than we think there is, and there's more to the universe than we think there is, and there's more within than we think there is. And the exploration within, I think, has probably been the biggest thing I've explored recently. And that probably takes the awareness that you mentioned earlier around just like being aware of what you're eating. That's like, it's such a superficial level to that whole analogy. But when you look into the pond, when you first look into it, it's so dirty and it is so much like muck there. And then the long lasting journey of it, which is a lifetime's work, is to try and see to the bottom of it. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. But
oh, it really does.
Yeah, definitely makes sense.
It's something I always say to Jonathan when we're walking along the beach is, I'm always saying, isn't it crazy? There's a whole world underneath this sand that we're walking on. There's all life under there, and we just don't see it, right? And it's the same when I look out at the sea. I'm like, John, look at the sea. Like, there's a world under there, and we have only seen so much of it. And I do the same thing. I'm like, look at the sky. Yeah. So literally, you're talking my language right now.
Definitely. And when you're saying about obviously that world within, there is no end to that world within. It is infinite. Obviously, without going too deep, because that can take up another couple of hours on another podcast. But it's that thing, and there is no end to it, and there is no end into the journey of going within. The deeper you go within, the more aware you become, and the more you start to connect with yourself. And then when that happens, you just create a life of infinite possibilities on whatever you want to create in your life, whatever you want to manifest. And that's and I think that's very powerful, is when people start to realize the physical world has limitations, our inner world has no limitations. So I think the more we start to connect with our inner worlds, the more we start to bring that into our outer world, and that's when we start to create those possibilities ourselves instead of wait for things to happen.
Yeah.
I think we're in transformation as well. That's such an important ingredient, because although the physical definitely has some limitations, but the reality is most people don't ever reach their full potential when it comes to what we're truly physically capable of. I'm sure you've seen some of those stories where, like, you know, a mum lifts up a truck out of nowhere because it's about to crush her baby. It's like, where does that strength come from? You know, there's so much more power there, and if we can start to channel that in ways that are going to help improve our own lives and the lives of others, well, I think it'll be a pretty special world to live in.
But I think one thing that's important to remember is that you said the world within, like looking within is infinite. But I think it's very difficult to look within if you haven't even mastered your physical being. Because, like, if you take the analogy of like the physical is vehicle, but you take the analogy of like the physical is like a chariot, right? If the chariot is dirty on the outside, you're not really going to be able to look inside. So I think you have to master the physical being first to then move up the levels, so to speak, on everything else, whether it's mental, emotional, spiritual. Just trying to do the spiritual work without taking care of your body, I think you're just going to be spinning your wheels.
It's so interesting that you say that, because sorry.
No, go ahead.
So purely because that's kind of the outlook I always had. But that being said, I think I always had the emphasis on the physical body. This is in the early days of my career. Is the physical was really the destination, not the vehicle. And I spent a long time training, eating well, progressing in my career and all of those things. It was only when I got a very, very heavy emotional wake-up call from a lot of unresolved things that I'd not dealt with, because I'd spent so much time pouring my energy into this physical vehicle, I completely neglected the mental well-being and emotional well-being. And then I actually went the other way, and then I went, it was like, okay, right, well, you know me, all or nothing, like we said earlier. All about like emotional, mental, what do I need to learn about myself, how can I implement this in all what we do and all of this kind of stuff. And it was then I started to neglect the physical, right? And then that was when it's like, yeah, something that should be common sense is that, no, this is all about integration. Like none of these things are separate. They are just all one thing. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that.
Yes, exactly. Everything works together, and it's how we coach clients as well, was to get them to look at the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual as one. Because it's not about, okay, I'm going to work on my mental health and then everything else is going to be fine. But your mental affects your emotional affects your physical affects your spiritual, goes back around again, and they all have a direct connection with each other. So you can't work on one without working on the other if you want lasting long-term results. So it's about, like Charlie said, that integration of that. So when you're working, like you said, you're working on the physical, but at the same time, you're also looking at the mental, the mental side of it, your identity to your body, how you feel, what you eat, how you train, that type of thing as well. So it's not just about eat this food is good for you, do this exercise is good for you. It's about, okay, what's my body telling me? How is my body feeling? How does it feel when it eats this? How does it feel when it does this movement? So it's connecting the mental, emotion, and physical together as one. And that's when you create that lasting change. So that's kind of how that's how we approach it with clients, is we focus on that. Okay, we're not just going to do, okay, let's look at your quality of thinking first, and then later on we'll touch on your emotions. And everything, it's like everything together. Obviously not pile everything down at once. You've got to do all this work in one day, but it's knowing how everything fits and connects together.
Totally agree.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Because all of them make everything else easier.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because as much as, like I said, like for me, I neglected one or all of those areas at some point. When I do look after the physical, everything else is so much easier. I have the energy, I have the capacity to do so. So I think it's really important for people to think about, what is their entry point? What do they feel is the lowest barrier to entry, just to get them moving in the right direction? So I think that is then where you get to find the right support. That's where you get to go and find you, Akash, and what you do, and see all these beautiful transformations. And you get to an element of all of those things that we've just been describing, but that will be the draw, in the same way that somebody might go to a therapist, because that's the draw. They think that needs their attention the most. But so long as all roads lead to home and they all lead to that space of integration and holistic wellness, I just think that is optimal wellness.
Yeah.
That's kind of my definition.
I agree. I think you got to combine all 5 pillars of health.
Yeah.
If you don't combine, if anything's missing, it's not all going to be working. But It's a journey. Like, this is going to take years and years and years. That's another thing to like. Selling that journey is very difficult, right? Selling a long-term journey, it might take you 3 years at least to be able to sustain the shape you're in, and have the right mental health to be able to maintain that body weight. But people want the 6 week stuff.
Yeah. You got to meet people where they are.
Exactly.
Right, because you've kind of got to feed both wolves at the same time. Otherwise, nobody moves.
That's why getting people into shape is a great draw. And like you said, the other one is like potentially they want to see a therapist because they think that might solve the initial problem. Yeah. But then it's always it's the first checkpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, Akash, so listen, is there anything else you feel like you want to add to this conversation before we start wrapping up? Anything you think our listeners really need to hear?
I think once you do integrate the 5 pillars of health, or the different areas of health, I think it's just really important to use it for be a force for good, and just find whatever for you is that thing. Like one thing for me is where I get a lot of inspiration and motivation is speaking to children between 16 and 24 who come from underprivileged backgrounds, especially in London, who just don't have the coaching, support, or resources to be able to unlock their potential. And for me, a lot of what I do is about unlocking potential. And so anytime I get a chance to speak to these people, I take it, because it's an opportunity to have an impact that may make them do something that could change the rest of their life, just either the way they change their thinking, or suddenly they have access to something. So for me, that's my thing. And of course, like spreading the word of the importance of health and fitness. But I think it's just finding your thing. I'm assuming all your listeners are high performers that want to make a real be a force for good in the world. And I think finding that one thing that can contribute as a society, as a community, is how we achieve our collective mission.
100%, definitely.
Absolutely, definitely, for sure. So Akash, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. But before we let you go, what's the best way for people or anyone listening to find you and just find more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So to head over to our website, www.rntfitness.com, to explore all our education, our podcasts, and everything there. You can find me on Instagram at Akash Vaghela, and you can check out my book as well, Transforming Body, Transform Your Life, which you can get on Amazon. So those are probably the best 3 places to find me.
Awesome. We'll put all those links in the show notes, so it's easy for anyone to find your book and find you, and just to learn more about what you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for coming.